Hi, everybody. Welcome to Silver Speech Speaking Series. My name is Marcy Silver, speech language pathologist here in New York City, and I'm also licensed in California and Connecticut as well. And here today, I'm so excited to welcome my very dear friend from high school, my friend Jason Ruel here. And I'm just so grateful because I started this Silver Speak series during pandemic, and pandemic has been horrific, but it's allowed me to really reach out to all of my friends and family and clients and colleagues to see what is needed. And I think one of the most important aspects of my job is learning all about growing up and what we experienced as kids, what we remember as kids. Did we have something that we needed to work on, or we had a disability, and how did it go for you, and what was the route you took? And I know 80s, we grew up in the 80s, born in the 70s, 80s and 90s education, and the education system today is very different than it was. So I am so happy to have you here, Jason. So I'm going to have you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Jason Ruel. I live now in Chesapeake, Virginia. It's right next to Virginia Beach. I've been here for the past 6.5 years. I currently, I've been working as a professional in video production for the past over 20 years. And actually part of that actually includes that I need to have good ears, or at least reasonably decent ears. But as far as my speech story and my hearing journey, so to speak, it started when I was young. I was, I think I was probably about 4 years old, maybe 3 years old. I had earaches. I had earaches constantly. And my mom took me to the pediatrician constantly also. And they actually, what they would do is my ear would be put into a thing of hot water, and they would actually flush it out. But it was one of those things, like, it was, because my ear was infected. So like when you're squirting hot water onto something that's infected, it doesn't feel that good. So I'd go and have that done, and I didn't think anything of it more than like going, all right, well, my ear's hurting and doctor's trying to fix it. So from there, I go into kindergarten and continue to have ear infections. And I remember very specifically, the teacher asked us, what word has the TH sound to it? And I remember clear as day, I said submarine. So it was supposed to be submarine. I said submarine. And then from there, my kindergarten teacher was really great with this and told my mom, hey, he's having an issue. He's pronouncing this wrong. And I don't think it's like being a little kid. I think this is something more. And more or less, it was found out, oh, I was hearing the S sound incorrectly. And the S sound and the Z sound are similar. So I had issues pronouncing it. And because I had pronounced it wrong for so long, my tongue had got used to pronouncing things that way. But then after that, had my hearing tested, and my hearing overall they thought was fine, and they thought it more came down to the fact that I had the ear infections, and the ear infections caused the issue. But because of that, I was going to speech therapists from kindergarten up through 6th or 7th grade. And, my mom and the school, that they were great with, getting me the help I needed. But I got the help I needed, but there was also a good bit of teasing that went on because of it.
Yeah, I was going to ask
Thankfully,
you about that. I was going to ask you, at what age did the bullying begin? Or the teasing begin exactly?
I don't think it happened too much in, like elementary school. I think like there were some people that might have said things here and there, but it was like middle school and it kind of went through until bits of high school, because even then I was still kind of working through it. And I mean, part of the correction, and I think it was like an overcorrection, is my S's started sounding more like SH. So, there was somebody specifically that, we went to high school with that used to call me Jaish because of how I pronounce stuff. And, as a kid, you kind of want to fit in. So I just kind of laughed it off. And it's like going, you know what, that was kind of a hole move,
Yeah.
And like, that's the way that person did that to me all the time. But and it's like I still remember it, and I still remember like going, I'm like, yeah, it wasn't that funny. It's like a kid dealing with something that was kind of sucky. It's like you felt a little different having to, like, everybody else is continuing in class, but I had to, like, oh, I've got to go to my speech therapy and miss out on certain things in class to go through speech therapy. Thankfully, there were one of my classmates had the same exact problem with S sounds and ended up being there with me. So at least I felt like I had somebody else in there, and there were a couple other people, and I had cousins growing up that had issues with R sounds. So, definitely something that kind of carried through. But I've had my hearing tested since then. My hearing, I would say overall, is actually not bad. They say it's about average now, but when people are talking to you, and sometimes you just don't quite hear them, and you ask them to repeat themselves, they repeat themselves, and you still don't quite hear them. By the time you get to the third time, I've just kind of taken the, like, I'm going to nod and agree, because
Yeah,
I
I
feel
agree.
bad. I
Yeah.
feel bad that they have to keep repeating themselves, but it's like I want to hear them and like give them a true and real, like, feedback from whatever they're saying. But I'm like, I don't know what they're saying, and I'm getting mildly embarrassed by keeping on asking them.
Yeah, no, I actually been diagnosed with a hearing loss myself later in life. And I struggle with the same situation. And I actually wear hearing aids. And I find that happens to me too. And I sort of give up after the third try. Or how about in instances where it's crowded, in the restaurant, there's a lot of background noise. How is that for you?
I've found crowded areas definitely aren't good, but actually what's worse for me, like, I've got like an electric toothbrush. If I'm brushing my teeth and somebody's trying to, it's like, or another thing that happens is somebody will be talking to me. They're not that far away, but their mouth is not pointing towards me. So, you're not hearing the voice quite as clearly. So it's like, or there's sometimes somebody will say a word, and the word they're saying is not the word I'm hearing. And I'll give them this look like, what? What are you saying? Like, I don't get what you're saying. But usually it's more like, I've got a fan on next to me. Like, if something's going on in the kitchen, I've got the vent fan on. Even if I have it on low, it's like somebody could be talking 5 feet away from me, and I'm kind of like, I know somebody's talking, but I'm not receiving much of anything.
Yeah, it's true. So listening to your history and how this all came about, um, you know, at this point, around kindergarten nowadays is later. So we do pick up on children birth to 5, where we can, evaluate. And usually from a 2 to 5, I would say I get a lot of referrals at 2. And that's my first, referral, is to go to the ear, nose, and throat doctor, go to get the child's hearing checked. And there's different types of hearing loss. And from what it sounds like, that you had a conductive hearing loss, which is caused by ear infections and fluid in your ear, which can be rectified. Did they find fluid in your ear? Is that what was one of the?
And that's why they would constantly flush out my ears, as they would find fluid in there. So I I don't know what caused it. I don't know anything as far as causes. And, you know, I was so young that, like, I just knew my mom took me to the doctor and took me to the doctor fairly often and put me down my ear down in a pan of hot water. And it wasn't, just one ear, it was both ears that
Yeah.
happened to.
Yeah,
So,
they do. And things probably have changed a lot. And I know they do surgery where they put, it's called a myringotomy, and they put tubes in your ears to drain the fluid. You could have had a lot of wax impaction. So we also have wax in our ear, which is different than fluid. So they probably were getting the wax out of your ear as well.
sure.
And I find that now that I experience hearing loss, I can really relate to children and how their behaviors impact their relationship with other children, or relationships with their parents, or the behaviors that you present with. It will look like not paying attention, or frustrated, or
Right.
tantruming. But that's actually because of hearing loss. Did you remember having that when you were a kid?
I do remember having that a bit when I was a kid, just from, you know, my mom ended up getting me tested several times after, like, having hearing tests after I had gotten a bit older. And she's like, she thought I was ignoring her. And it's like, Mom, I can't, like, I could hear you, but I can't hear you, type thing. And, when they do the hearing tests, at least back then, and I think hopefully they've changed it a little bit, but I think a flaw in it was, like, they would want you to kind of like close your eyes and really listen. So, you didn't have your eyes open, you didn't have any other distractions, you just closed your eyes. Do you hear something? Yes, I hear something, but it's because I'm, like, ultra concentrated on listening for a sound. Whereas if a bunch of other things are going on, I'm not concentrating on sound. So, and even so, listening to a beat versus a human voice is just, it's not the same. And I don't, I would always, do relatively, like, okay with the auditory tests for that. But
Yeah, the some of the procedures have changed, and some of them have remained the same. But for the really young kids, they do play audiometry, where they have them look at a puppet when they hear a sound, or they have to put blocks into a peg into the board when they hear the sound. There's a lot of creative and testing now. And then there's also what they call auditory processing test, where it's how are we processing language? Are we delayed in our language process, in addition to just regular hearing testing? So it sounds like at 5 in school they were able to pick it up. Now you received services through the Board of Ed?
Yeah, it was at my school. I went to O'Connell School in Bristol when it still existed, and they had a speech therapist specifically at O'Connell School that I would go to for somewhere around 45 minutes, a couple times a week. And I had one named Mrs. LaPierre. There was one Mrs. Kauke, and I think there was another one I'm forgetting, but like I had each of them for a few years. And, you know, by the time we were in middle school, they said that I had improved enough to not have to do that anymore. But, even to this day, it's like if I speak too quickly, if there are too many S sounds in rapid succession, the TH sound will still occasionally come out. Like I, as a challenge to myself, I was reading the King James version of the Bible, and it says an awful lot transgresseth. So I have the TH sound there and some S's, and and I was like, I gotta read this aloud. I gotta read this aloud. And like I kept on transgresseth. Like there were so many THs that I was like going, all right, that's something I still need to slow down and make sure I pronounce it correctly, because otherwise you get into a bad habit and then your tongue does that more than it's supposed to.
Yeah, and I think, when I evaluate children when they're young, there are certain sounds that I automatically say to myself, okay, this child needs to get their hearing checked. And that would be we call them high frequency sounds, such as any sound that has a lot of air coming through it. We don't hear those sounds necessarily. And, because when we do hearing testing, some people have hearing loss in the high frequency, or some people have hearing loss in the low frequencies. For me, particularly, my hearing loss is not a conductive hearing loss where there is fluid in my ear. I have a sensory neural hearing loss, which was caused by damage. I took medication and that caused the hearing loss. So there's a sensory neural versus conductive when you're a kid, and you go through that. But that's also, from what it sounds like, you didn't have surgery, you had ear infections, you were able to, you didn't, whether you needed it or not, but the sounds were still affected pretty similarly in a way. And I know, like, men's voices for me on the phone, or in a lecture, or or watching television, I have a really hard time hearing men's voices because my hearing loss is in the low frequencies. So,
I gotcha. So I would imagine the equalization and turning the low end, to a higher frequency probably helped you out a bit.
yeah. And
now, I was going to say, as far as that goes, how did that help you kind of have a better understanding of the people that you were helping?
Yeah, it's really amazing, actually, because I struggle significantly, and even as older people, their hearing also goes when they're older from being in like a war vet, or being in really loud work environments. But what I find is that I tune out, or I really get frustrated and really angry and irritable, where I just don't want to, I don't want to engage. And so, like, in big groups or at dinner, if there's more than 4 people, I don't care. I don't want to. So it really does affect your mental status. And as a kid, I see kids putting their hands over their ears all the time. And parents will say, but my kid can hear, he puts his hands over his ears. And I say, but when you have a hearing loss, some sounds are piercing to you because those sounds you can hear, but then the sounds that don't, so I see that in kids. And then just like their lack of attention, or they're not paying attention, or their eye contact is they're looking down. So I just see the behaviors and say to myself, and they don't have the language to explain that. So they
Sure.
can't tell you that their ear hurts. And some kids are so passive anyway, they're in personality too. Like you might have a kid that's constantly like, my ear hurts, but then you have a passive kid that doesn't even really know how to say that. I see that now and can understand their frustration or why they're not responding or their behavior. So that's how I relate, for sure.
Sure. Well, and like when you're a kid and you start to squint at things, people are like going, "Oh, they need glasses." Where I don't think it's quite the same thing when it comes to ears, because I mean it's just it's a different sense, and dealing with it in like when you see somebody go like this, you're like going, "Oh, there's a hearing issue." And even in my job today, where it's like I'm editing together spots that go on TV that like a whole bunch of people watch, it needs to sound right. So a lot of times what I actually do is I will either turn off the computer or turn off the monitor itself, or I will just turn my back to it, and I will do that literally where just to make sure I'm like going, all right, I hear that piece. Oh, I hear that piece. I hear that piece. Is it too loud? Is it too soft? And I've been able to, over the years, understand, okay, if I've got this voice here, this is what the volume should be. I'll take the music and I will match it to that. And then I know I need to take it down at least 12 decibels. So that way the sound from the song and the sound with the voice aren't competing with each other so much. But that's just experience. It's like knowing that, because I've concentrated on listening, helps me a lot, instead of every time I'm doing it like going, well, this sounds about right. It's like going, I at least have some sort of formula where it's like, all right, I know I will be at least somewhat in the zone if I do this.
Well, I'm really glad that, we're catching up on this because, I work with so many disabilities and so many abilities. And so, I see so many different learning differences. And what I'm finding is the kids that struggle or have areas that need improvement, they actually end up being experts in that area. And so I remember you as a high school student, and you were a musician, like you loved music and you took to music, which is a lot of people, when I go evaluate them or parents, they're like, oh, but she picks up on the music, she picks up on the tune, she hums and she knows. And it's and because it reaches every decibel, every frequency, it helps hearing loss. So I'd love to hear more about how you got into music and when you started, because I enjoy listening to your music now.
I it was strange. When I was a kid, my mom was not overly fond of popular music at all. And the bits of music I actually got into was from a couple of things. I got to go to Roller Palace with my friends and got to go roller skating and listen to the stuff that was out in the mid to late 80s, like Guns N' Roses and Aerosmith and what have you. And I got into music like that. But the one thing that my mom actually allowed me to have in the house was I loved the movie La Bamba. And we had a copy of the La Bamba soundtrack, and I wore out that tape. I love the album. Like, you put it on now, I'll still be able to sing every tune, and I could somewhat play some of the songs on guitar, but I really love that, and it kind of went from there and kind of went into a whole bunch of different music all over the spectrum. I mean, certainly when we grew up, it's like, yes, I was listening to Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and all that stuff. And even beyond that, though, when I got into college, it was Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and all those things. And those bands I kind of listened to in high school, but I got more into them later. And then I did a radio show in college for a few years with my roommate, and we would do classical stuff. We would do anything under the sun. But from there, as far as like picking up instruments, like I played trumpet when I was in elementary school and did that up until freshman year in high school. And, I learned how to read notes with it, but it just stopped being fun because when I played during the Thanksgiving Day game freshman year, Central versus Eastern, I think it was like 28 degrees out there. And when you have a brass instrument that's cold against your cold lips, and you have to push in, I mean, my lips were bleeding. I was like going, you know what, this is not fun. My parents were a little upset that, the trumpet was no longer a love of mine, but, I learned some scales. I learned how to read music, but I was like, I think I'd like to do guitar or something like that. So I picked up a guitar book, and started learning chords. And, I would get guitar tablatures, but after a while, not that I could do it super quickly, but I actually learned how to play by ear. And a lot of that actually has to do with knowing the lower frequencies. Because when you're playing the guitar, if you're trying to pick up what they're playing, you'll listen to what the bass note is. So if the bass note's a C, a lot of times you're going to be playing a C natural chord, or you're going to be playing a C minor chord. There are some bands out there that play, extremely inventive chords, but most people it's a C or a C minor. But I learned how to play by ear. But again, with that, you have to kind of slow things down, because there are a lot of things going on with instruments. You've got multiple instruments going on. You've got drums that are playing one frequency. You got a bass playing another frequency. You got a singer at a different frequency. So trying to get that all straight, you have to slow it down. But I went from playing guitar to I had a drum set for a while. I had a bass guitar in college, because I was like, well, I might as well learn some keyboard. And I'm a pretty poor keyboard player. I'm a pretty poor bass player, but I could play them each enough to be all right. But I always was interested in the sounds and the emotions that were brought about by the sounds. So from there, I got 2 guitars right there.
Wow.
So
it sounds like your hearing loss has, it's kind of your superpower in a way, because you had to really focus on sound production and really listen. I mean, as a speech therapist, in order for us to make a difference, the child has to have attention. First, we have to train attention and build attention in order to make progress. And then they also have to practice, right? So do you remember having homework in speech therapy?
I remember having homework and practice. They would give us certain sentences to say and certain things to say just to keep that muscle moving, and one, get the tongue to get into the right position, and just also auditorily being able to hear ourselves saying it correctly. And it was a slow process. Like I said, I was going from basically, I don't know if I started in kindergarten, it might have been first grade, but I was going through all elementary school. It may have, I have slight recollections that maybe I went to it a time or two in middle school, but it was basically first through sixth grade, definitely,
Wow.
of trying to get that fixed. But, you know, when you're talking about the attention thing, you know, they say folks with ADHD, they will hear things and but it just sounds like gobbledygook. And I want to say that maybe I have a mild case of that added on to the, you know, having the problems with ear infections and having hearing difficulties. So, you know, definitely I understand where you're coming from, trying to first get them to attention. And
Yeah.
then once you get to attention, then, you know, that's the foundation right there, and then build up.
Yeah. And, you know, I see a lot of clients with ADHD, ADD, and I mean, I feel like our whole world at this point has it. You know, every person has it now, because of the internet, because of Facebook, because of Twitter, all of that. But you know, the true ADHD or the child who has dyslexia or they actually learn. And what I love about talking with you is the compensation and the problem solving you had to go through to to make it easier for yourself. So, you know, all the therapy in the world, it doesn't matter if when a child realizes they're having trouble with something, they find problem solving ways to get themselves through it. And so, you know, in school, when we get these when I get these referrals and the teachers are like, they can't do this, they can't do that, they can't do, or who, you know, the parents, whatever it is, and it's like, now I realize, and I have to say to the parents, you know, they struggle with these things, but you know, their strengths are what is going to drive their success. Or their interests are going to drive their success. So for you, you know, you had a hearing issue, but music was your, you know, your outlet, and sports was your, you know, your sports was your outlet. But it's just fascinating to me to listen. I mean, what I love about this interview is how now you're in a field where you have to listen and not probably talk that much. I mean, do you talk a lot in your field?
So with my job specifically, there are times where I need to talk. With the position I'm in now, I have to talk a bit more, and I'll have to do some public speaking. And quite honestly, that was something like I was always good talking one-on-one with people. I remember all of our ski trips and having long, exhaustive conversations about anything and everything. But when it came to being in front of a group, it definitely has been something that has had to be a learned skill. Because heck, I mean, even if I go and play like a open mic night, like I'm so jittery before I get up there, and when I get off the stage, it'll be like this big sigh of relief, but also an adrenaline rush at the same time. But you know, I had to, when I was in college, I was in the TV studio an awful lot, and they would run tours through there an awful lot. And that was kind of the start where when the tours would come through, because I would be there and know everything we had, they would like me to speak. So, you know, you got a whole bunch of teenagers and parents, and, you know, you want to talk up your university and you want to talk about the great things that you have available. And it was a quick way of getting me to take care of a bit of stage fright, and clearly part of that, though, going back to when I was younger, having problems with speech and speaking in front of people causes anxiety. And it was, fifth grade. I remember I wrote an essay. We had to write something about something environmental, and I had to stand up in front of the entire school and read an essay I wrote. I was happy and proud of the essay I wrote. I remember bits of it still, but for somebody with a speech problem, that's a big hill to climb. But from being in college and doing that all those years ago, and there exists, I have video proof of this. They actually had me, and they considered this a guerrilla marketing campaign. I had to go out in the streets of Providence like 8 or 9 years ago, and I needed to try to convince people to watch Hell's Kitchen, House, and TMZ. And my boss originally gave me like a script. I'm like, this isn't supposed to be scripted. I'm supposed to be messing with people. And I was handing out like devil dogs and things like that. So, it took me about 10 or 15 minutes to get myself all jazzed up to go and do these things. And ironically enough, like the biggest award show for doing what I do, which is making promos for television stations, there's a thing called Promax, which happens in Las Vegas every year. The stuff I did on camera in front of people, where I was scared the heck out of doing it, and I actually did pretty good, and we actually won a gold medallion, which was like the top honor of anything in the United States. So I'm like, going, sweet. But even beyond that, I have to, in my position now, meet with organizations. I've done work with American Diabetes Association, Walk MS, Leukemia Lymphoma Society, you name it. But like, I am actually the liaison for my TV station to these places. Another thing I did was clear the shelters. I had to get on the phone and talk with, in this area, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 24 different shelters. So a lot of my issues with speech and what have you, like, even though I realize I still have it, what I would have to do is I would write myself a little script of like, because getting on the phone and like cold calling somebody to be like, hey, would you like to be part of this campaign? It's a little bit unnerving. So I would write myself a script so that way I could practice it a couple times before I pitched it. And even when I would have meetings with folks face to face, I would try to, what are they going to ask me? What do I need to respond with? So it was definitely a bit of preparation into going into that.
Look at that. So that, again, there's another compensatory strategy, or a strategy that you use to get through whatever you need to. And, in my therapies, and now that I'm doing these videos, I actually, interviewed one of my clients who stutters, and she is taking a public speaking class this year, and she was dreading that. And now, she's able to do this video. And I'm doing a bunch of videos with my other students, both young and, and older teenagers. And, what I am recognizing is that my work with these students is helping them realize that, most of what we tell ourselves is incorrect, or what other people tell us we can't do. And we develop this fear, which is not, fear, we have to overcome our fear by doing our fear. And so it's pretty amazing that you're, at this juncture in your life where you have this career that, you do all of that. You do listening, you do speaking. And it does seem that stuttering, a lot of stutterers are public speakers, or, hearing impaired people are not, they don't let it stop them, or any disability becomes their superpower, their ability, instead of their disability.
Well, I mean, you look at people like Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder. They lost their ability to see, and the music that comes out of them.
Yeah.
I'm amazed at the fact that, like, okay, you could sit somebody like that down at a piano, and like the muscle memory is so good, and the tone in their, they could hear so well, compensating for the fact they can't see. It's like, I mean, it just blows me away. Things like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely blows me away.
I'm definitely noticing, just I'm learning so much from my clients and from friends and, family, seeing what they were struggling with and now what their performance is as an adult. And I say to parents, you're going to hear all these things that your child cannot do, or they struggle with this, or they struggle with that. And I really do try to put a positive spin, because most of the people that have these challenges are the future of our world. The children or teenagers who can't do school necessarily, or school's hard for them, or school's not their thing, they end up doing, and that multitasking, that ADHD quality, they're thinking about different things, not thinking about whatever's happening in the classroom, but they're actually the creative ones, the innovative ones.
And speaking into that, I know for one of the things that I've done, I've been very like deliberate about, is I've slowly but surely tried to eliminate certain things from my daily routine that I felt were actually causing me to not concentrate as well as I should. Like, one of the things I wholeheartedly believe in, put down the electronic device at least 30 minutes before I go to sleep. I find I sleep better, and I'm not like still processing and what have you. But those are just some of, like several things just to, again, help the thing that has a little bit of a deficit. But I've always been one of those people that I want you to tell me I can't, and then I'm going to show you that you're wrong. And I think it's important for people to have that mindset with anything. You end up, your body and your senses end up compensating for those things, and you end up coming up with, whether it's, working with somebody like you that helps develop a strategy, or you just kind of get your own, like, all right, well, I can't do this well, but I can do this, which is going to help me out, so I don't need to be quite as strong at this, but I can make this work.
Yeah. And that's, and that's what I'm, my field is all about, is showing them, that you can do it, and that we have to break it up step by step, and we have to figure out what works for each person. And there isn't just one size fits all. Everybody is different. So that's what I love about my job, is that I'm constantly learning. Like, I have a teenager right now who's working on his pitch, his voice. And he has been he's very self-conscious of his high-pitched voice. And he's been working so hard that he's ended up creating all these different voices. And I was like, you could be a voiceover, and those voiceovers do very well. And so here we are, you know, talking about having this area that needs improvement, which then can, you know, open up doors for him. So for anybody. So I just loved hearing that from you. And I'm just cracking up because yeah, like I love that I've been posting these on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, and people are reaching out, and you were like, hey, I had a hearing loss as a kid. I'm like, oh, let's get him on the interview.
Yeah, you know, and it was crazy how you had reached out, and then all of a sudden there was something that came about that said, like, you need to share your story about things that you've been challenged by. And I was like, I do, don't I? Because quite honestly, I don't think too many people knew that I dealt with it as an issue.
Yeah.
There were certain people that did, but not too many. But,
yeah, and it's interesting. Everybody has a different, you know, a different take on, should I tell people, should I not tell people? You know, and I'm getting that with my clients, the teenagers these days. And one of my clients who's a stutterer, she just, what I love about her is she just tells people immediately. Like when she starts talking, she's like, just so you know, I stutter. And that's something that's so brave, and other people are like, oh wait, I do too, or oh, I have this. So being candid about what you have is so important, because it kind of takes the anxiety off yourself when you just get it out immediately.
And I would think it kind of diffuses things, because the other people at the table or wherever you are will be like, what's going on with this? This person can't talk. And it's like, are they anxious, or are they, nope, it's just something that happens. Sometimes I've heard people who stutter, sometimes it's because they are anxious, and then sometimes people just stutter.
Yeah, so it's really great just to hear what people, you know, what kids are doing these days to, you know, not hide behind their disability or their, you know, or the area that needs improvement, just saying it.
And I would imagine for you, seeing that growth and strength just, I mean, is like the greatest thing that you could see doing what you do.
Yeah, and it helps me, you know, in life, it helps me be grateful for what I have. And even with this hearing loss, I sometimes just, I use it to diffuse the situation, or not have to put that pressure on myself to have to keep up with the conversation. Or it also works, you know, when you don't feel like communicating, you could just be like, I can't hear.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
You know,
yeah,
back
so
in the
it does
day,
work.
You know, I was a bowling coach. I taught kids from like 5 years old to 18. You know what the funny thing was I was pretty good at it before I was coaching them. But because I was constantly reminding them that, hey, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, then when I was in my league, like my average went up like 15 pins, which is significant, just because I was reminding them, it was reminding me. And you know, it helps make you better. Have you seen that for yourself, where like, because you've already developed a whole bunch of different techniques, that like it's helped you navigate it?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, it is, now that I have this hearing problem, it just helps me, like, it helps me be a better therapist. It helps me explain to parents. It helps me relate to others much more than before. So I'm grateful that, you know, I have this, even though I have a hearing loss, like I can now advocate for my clients more. than
All
before.
right, cool.
So, well, thanks so much. It was such a pleasure. I was just thinking how much we hung out in high school, and that from between skiing, and then I was thinking, wait, I think I went to the junior prom with your brother.
Yep.
Thanks
Yep.
to Stacy Perini, who was, unfortunately she passed away, and but that's how we all became such good friends.
Yeah.
So that's what's so amazing. We always had fun on those ski trips.
You know what? There was nothing like the conversations pre and post ski day.
Yeah.
Like what
And
happened
then
during the ski day, and like you're just dog tired at the end of the day, and you're like, but
and the
they
bus
were a great
rides,
time.
they were fantastic. It was such a great time of our lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. And I'm sure everybody's going to have questions and comments. So I look forward to it. And I'm sure it would be great to have you on again to talk, specifically about more of those compensatory strategies and strategies that hearing loss can benefit from. So.
Sure. Absolutely. I'm game whenever.
All right. Thanks so much.
No problem, Marcy.